This is Tom Fox. Welcome to the newest edition in the Compliance Podcast Network. My latest podcast, Compliance and Coronavirus. As the voice of compliance, I wanted to start a podcast which will help bring both clarity and sanity to the field of compliance, the compliance practitioner, and indeed the compliance profession during this worldwide health and healthcare crisis. Taking up a variety of topics as diverse as working from home, to sporting events, to the role of the board of directors, to crisis management, to the role of supply chains. We will look at all of these in this podcast. If you have a topic you'd like covered on compliance and coronavirus, please let me know. I'd be happy to do a podcast on it. Today I have with me Dionne Lomax. She is the Managing Director, Antitrust and Trade Regulations at Affiliated Monitors. We discuss issues relating to M&A work coming out of the business reopening in Q3 and 4 and what the compliance practitioner needs to do around antitrust compliance. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. And today I have with me Dionne Lomax. She is Managing Director of Antitrust and Trade Regulation at Affiliated Monitors. So, Dionne, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Oh, thank you, Tom. I'm very happy to be here.
Could you give us a little bit about your role with AMI?
Sure. I recently joined AMI after having spent a long time in private practice. I was a partner at two law firms focusing solely on antitrust, mainly in the M&A regulatory space. And I decided to give up private practice and became a professor and ran into my old buddy, Jesse Kaplan, who I used to work with at the DOJ. And so recently joined AMI as the Managing Director for Antitrust and Trade Regulation. And in this capacity, I'm really spearheading our efforts to help companies conduct proactive assessments of their corporate and their antitrust compliance programs and their related ethical cultures. And so it also includes monitoring conditions that are imposed on companies in antitrust settlements with federal and or state antitrust authorities.
One of the things that I really wanted to visit with you about, because I think it's flying under the radar, is the issues around not only antitrust, but also M&A, which I think are going to explode starting in Q3 and Q4 and into the next couple of years. And that's because of the economic dislocation. And so, as you know, I'm in Houston, and we're already seeing energy companies lining up to file bankruptcies. We have many companies that are downsizing dramatically. Long-winded way of saying there's going to be a lot of distressed assets out there. So I was wondering if, from that perspective, what are some of the key questions that you are getting from clients about M&A work, antitrust regulation, and how to meet the requirements of the new antitrust division's corporate compliance evaluations that are moving forward?
So first and foremost, I would just say, as an independent monitor, we don't really have clients in the way that, say, law firms have clients, or the type of clients I used to have. So I'll respond by offering a perspective on three main issues I think that are raised by your question. The first issue is, how do antitrust compliance issues change if there is an increase in consolidation? And let's look at COVID-19 for, obviously COVID-19 is having an impact across a host of industries, but in particular the healthcare industry, as well as others. And so given this impact, obviously some industry participants, they do expect that there's going to be consolidation. I absolutely agree with you. But I think that what companies need to understand is that just because there's this, economic downturn and this, necessity to consolidate, it doesn't mean that the antitrust laws are on pause. And so even amidst the pandemic and the effects of the pandemic, how do the antitrust compliance issues change? Well, unfortunately for some folks, it really doesn't. The federal antitrust authorities, which includes the Department of Justice and Antitrust Division, and the Federal Trade Commission Bureau of Competition, have both stated that they will continue to closely scrutinize proposed mergers, whether that be among healthcare providers or other industry participants. And they basically have said that they note that all of the competitive concerns that they would have had before the pandemic and its economic effects, they are still going to have, despite the complications presented by the pandemic. The other thing I'll mention is that there are actually certain state attorneys general that have signaled that further consolidation, particularly on the healthcare side, will be heavily scrutinized. The California, you may have heard about this, but the California Attorney General recently asked its state legislature to essentially expand its authority over healthcare mergers to include for-profit companies. And this is huge because if this statute passes, the new law would essentially require health systems and private equity groups and hedge funds to essentially get consent from the California Attorney General's office before consummating their transactions. Right now, California AG that's only required for nonprofit entities.
So yesterday, you led I thought, great webinar on the Antitrust Division's evaluation of antitrust compliance programs, which was released in the summer of 2019. So I was wondering if maybe we could take off from that and talk about some of the key things that you think compliance officers need to be considering as we move into the reopening phase and indeed into the fall, really from that document's perspective. What are sort of you seeing, or what might your thoughts be?
I think that compliance officers need to realize that when they whether it's seeking to work with a rival in connection with, resolving issues with the pandemic, or partnering with a rival on certain joint ventures or what have you, or even merging as a result of some of the economic issues that have resulted, I think that they need to keep in mind that the authorities are still really paying close attention to how they work with their competitors. So, for example, if you're going to work with a rival, short of a merger, you need to make sure that your purpose for doing it has a pro-competitive aspect to it, that you're not just, using it to collude and price fix or what have you. You need to make sure that there are certain perhaps efficiencies related to any joint venture or other collaboration that the company wants to engage in with rivals in the industry. I also think that, it's important to understand that even though the antitrust laws prohibit certain things, they're still flexible in that it does allow companies to share technical know-how, for example, to collaborate on research and development. So, I don't want compliance officers to think that there's a big red X on anything they want to do collaboratively. I just think that they need to be careful, obviously consult with either their in-house counsel or their outside antitrust counsel before embarking on certain things, and understand some of the rules of the road when you do talk with a competitor, making sure you steer clear of, price fixing and market allocation and those types of things.
A couple of the key themes I got from the Antitrust Division's evaluation document were that compliance officers need to both assess the data, and that data needs to be documented within an overall what I would call a well thought out plan, leading to documenting your decision making. Would that hold true for even at this point in time?
No, yeah, absolutely. Because what the agencies are going to look towards, if they're investigating you, they're looking to see what is the anti-competitive effect of the behavior that you're engaging or the conduct that they're investigating. And so I think it behooves in anyone who's working with a competitor in any way, shape, or form to make sure if you're going to have a meeting, have an agenda where you document what the purpose of the meeting is. Here are all the items that we plan to discuss. Don't veer away from that agenda. If you do, make sure that you still stick within the guidelines that the agency recommends. And not only that, I think that, they really look at contemporaneous documents to see what the true intent and purpose of an activity is. Oftentimes, when you look at antitrust complaints, both agencies are notorious, even state AGs, they are notorious for quoting contemporaneous documents to basically show, hey, the party said that they were doing it for this pro-competitive reason, but this email or this document, here suggests otherwise. So I would recommend agendas. I would recommend any meetings, particularly, at the board level, closely document the purpose for any type of collaboration or arrangement in order to, it's not a complete get out of jail free card, but it will certainly help you in terms of your own credibility before the agency.
The other thing was to utilize, once again, I really love the way you phrased that. I would say a business justification, and tie your actions to that business justification throughout the process. The communication, one of the things that struck me yesterday in the webinar was the importance of training. And I was wondering if you could give a few words about not only the importance of training, but how a compliance practitioner might think about delivering antitrust training, either to targeted or high-risk individuals, or just to raise awareness within an organization.
Absolutely. I think that you want to make sure you have training from, all aspects of the business. But first and foremost, you really do want to target that training for those areas of the business that have the highest likelihood of raising antitrust issues. So, for example, if you have a sales force that is out there and they're parts of the trade associations and things of that nature, or even some of your VPs or mid-level managers who often frequently go to conferences and participate in trade associations or other types of industry meetings, I think you want to make sure and target that group of individuals first, because that's kind of where your low-hanging fruit is going to be in terms of potential to have some issues, whether it be, sharing competitively sensitive information, et cetera. So I think starting at that level, but also not forgetting that human resource folks need to be aware of the antitrust laws. That's a newer area that, in particular, the DOJ has been focusing on because of this issue of no poach agreements that some companies have begun to enter into. Hey, we're going to just agree not to hire each other's employees. And so I would say it needs to be a very targeted approach. It needs to be not only remote. I think what has worked for me in the past when I represented clients is go on site, sit with, the people who deal with pricing and have a roundtable discussion about how they do their job. And here's some of the, things you need to be steer clear of. I think that clients really like that hands-on approach. They want to make sure and know that you understand their business, and that you're not just there to be a naysayer, but you're there to help them achieve their goals, but in a way that also protects them in the company, right? Because let's not forget, antitrust violations can hurt a company, but certain individuals, especially if it's a criminal prosecution, can go to jail. And so that would be my thought. Do it in person, but also do it remote, do some reminders remotely. Shoot them. One of the things I used to like to do is, after I would develop an antitrust compliance program for a client and delivered it either in person or remotely, depending on what worked, I would send them quick little just tips and reminders, like maybe every 6 months, just a little, here's the top 10 things you need to be thinking about right now from an antitrust compliance perspective, just so that they always keep it top of mind.
So one question I've always had is the following. I lived in Dubai when I worked for Halliburton. And my observation was that if you were an American living in Dubai, you were probably in the energy industry. And there were lots of informal get-togethers with the Americans. It could be a barbecue with our families. It could be playing golf. I was a cyclist, so I joined a cycling club. And of course, the Americans tended to segregate together, or at least hang out together. And we were all in energy. And I've always wondered, are those, and of course, not everyone talked. And I've always wondered, are those sorts of informal groups, are those seen as high risk as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is why I think that chief compliance officers need to make sure that they are always encouraging those who attend those types of things, keep top of mind what those rules of the road are. Yes, if you go to these informal, of course you're not going to have an agenda, right? So that rule, that guidance doesn't work. But you just say, hey, okay to have a conversation, but once you start veering into, this industry, here's a problem and, with our margins in this industry, maybe we can do something about that. That's when you want to, walk away. And what I often say is, try to make some type of a noisy exit where somebody will remember that you left that discussion. So they can say, oh, Dionne, she just spilled red punch all over me and said, hey, I can't have this discussion with you. She threw a plate in the air. And no, I'm being a little bit facetious, but you see where I'm going with that. You want to, because if anything ever comes of that, you want, if there were, 5 people in a circle, you want each and every one of those people to remember, oh, this party from this company said that this was wrong and they left the discussion.
Dionne, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time, but I was wondering if listeners wanted to go for more information on either yourself or AMI, where could they go?
They can go to the AMI website and affiliatedmonitors.com. But the other thing that I would say is that you should also consider the DOJ and the FTC website, which will have additional guidance, particularly as it relates to COVID-19 and some guidance from the agencies in terms of working with any rivals.
Dionne, this has been a fascinating a visit as we move into Q3 and 4. I hope I can perhaps call upon you again to see what the situation might be and any changes or additional advice you might have.
That sounds great. Would love to. Thanks so much, Tom.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of Compliance and Coronavirus. This podcast posts 3 times a week at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of each week. That's 10 a.m. Central Time. I hope you will check out our episodes as we post during this health crisis and economic dislocation. This month on The Compliance Life, I'm featuring Ryan Robillé, who talks about his journey to the CCO chair.